Welcome back. Today we are actually going to be playing with some clay and we're going to be making what's called a relief sculpture. Now, a relief sculpture means that it's still something that's 3D and pops up, but it's only meant to be looked at from one direction. So it kind of pops out like a pop-up book instead of being like a big sculpture that you could walk the whole way around and see everything around it. So some things that you're going to need to follow along today are some type of clay. I just have some regular old Crayola air dry clay. Any brand of air dry clay will work. Any type of Play-Doh that you might have, a salt dough recipe that you've made, any of those things will work. In fact, you could even make this out of cookie dough if it's okay with your grown-ups and bake a giant cookie relief sculpture. That could be pretty awesome. You will need some type of rolling pin. This is literally just a rolling pin that is from a Play-Doh set. You will need some implements of marking your clay. I have a fork and a knife from a fast food restaurant. I even have some chopsticks so that I can have a little stick if I need to. You will need some water, which is what I have in here. And you might need some things to stamp into your clay or Play-Doh to make some new textures. I have a paper towel and some bubble wrap, but if you had some sort of fabric that you are allowed to use, or a piece of cardboard that has an interesting texture to it, you could even use the bottom of a shoe if you wanted to do this. Are we ready to get started? All right, let's find out how we're going to do this. So our first step is going to be to make a pancake out of some of our clay. And you'll notice that I have this big crinkly piece of paper underneath my clay. And that's because this will stick to your table if you're using the air dry clay. So you might want something that is going to allow you to pick it up more easily. So the first thing you're probably going to want to do is squish whatever dough you are using with your hands, and then roll it out into a pretty big pancake. So I am just using that Play-Doh roller. You can use whatever rolling pin your grown-ups say that it is okay for you to use. And sometimes when you're rolling, you have to take what you're rolling and flip it. And that helps it become even easier to roll it out. It has to do with the molecule and space separation that happens when you are rolling. All right, now we have a pretty nice pancake. You see how thin it is? You don't want it much thinner than that or your sculpture will fall apart. You don't want it much thicker than that because then your sculpture might be too fat and take forever to dry. So with this sculpture, boys and girls, we're going to be taking our background and then we're going to be taking flat things and layering them on top to make our picture. So when you start to design the things that are going to go in the background, you need to think about what they are going to be. Maybe it's just a big hill with a funny little tree and a cloud. Maybe it is a house. Maybe it's a train. It's whatever you want it to be. I'm actually going to make mine outer space, which is pretty easy because all I have to do is make some pancake shapes. We already know how to make that. We roll it into a ball and then squish it. And I'm keeping mine round. If I wanted it to be even flatter, I could that because these will be my planets. And I could put a ring around my planet. And to keep everything flat, if I have something that pops up too much, I can even twist that around like that. I can just take this and roll it if I want it to be flatter. Or I could keep it popping up a little bit more. One of the things that you'll notice as you start to build this, though, is that if you have everything kind of the same texture, which means that it's the same smooth surface, it kind of blends in. Do we see that? How this really doesn't stand out? So that's where these things come in, because you can press your textured object into your clay and pull it off, and then your clay has the same texture. You'll see how that stands out just a little bit more. Same thing with that bubble wrap that I chose. And just push it into the clay. And then my clay has that bubble wrap texture. And then I could cut it from there if I wanted to. Kind of looks like a moon with craters. And see how some things stay in my rectangle and some things pop off? That's okay. You can even I can draw things in. And then all I do is whatever I'm using, I set it aside and I let it dry. And then I can come back later and I can paint it. If I'm using an air dry clay or a salt dough or a homemade Play-Doh. If you are using regular Play-Doh, you just squish it back together and use it again later, or let it dry with the colors that you have. And if you're making cookies, well, maybe you take them out of the oven and you decorate them later. Now, if you are using, so this is what I was able to create today with my relief sculpture, and I'm super excited to see what you guys create. Since I used air dry clay, I can set this aside, like I said before, and I can let it dry, and I can come back and paint it with regular paints. I don't have to worry about glazing it because it's air dry clay, so it's going to dry without baking. We don't have to put it in a special oven. If you are using salt dough or a homemade Play-Doh, you can probably paint it too after it's dry. You could also even just make a relief sculpture out of Legos and build it flat and make a picture. I am excited to see what you make. Go ahead and take pictures when you're done and send me an email. Hey guys, go do a thing.